Hi. All right, wonderful. All right, great. Thanks for joining room 5. That's my lucky number. As I mentioned, I've been farming for a long time, but officially here in Darnestown for about 5 years. And for about 25 years, I've been learning about and implementing permaculture design practices. That started with a basic understanding that things aren't right and how can they be right. And a year at the USDA's Climate Stress Lab really solidified that things aren't right. And so it's just been kind of a really great learning journey to get there. And I guess just for introductions, I'll pass it back to you, Beck, and then we can get started, I guess.
Yeah, so I have a varied background everywhere from law to nonprofit management, native plants in Santa Barbara, and marketing. But I've been focused primarily on climate action professionally, but it's really my personal life that has brought me to where I am here right now. And the question for me has always been, how can we live together in a way that feels more authentic to me and the kind of person I want to be in the world, and that is more connected to nature and life as I feel it in my bones, not like as a movement, but as something that I feel a part of. And that has taken me to be part of a new co-housing group in Seattle, Jackson Place Co-housing. And I was part of the first cohort that moved in there. I have been a part of many forming co-housing groups, which have never materialized, but great community building, and also informs where I am in villaging. I've had a chance to live at Twin Oaks commune just for several weeks. It's part of their intro program. And I learned a lot about, what to me until that time was the ultimate vision of what a community could be. So with all that background, villaging is the piece that I've come to. And so we'll learn more, what I think about that. So Bridget, I think, Bridget has, I thought maybe we'd start off with Bridget talking about the permaculture principles, because you're going to find that they also inform villaging. And that's why we decided to talk together.
Yeah.
But maybe, Bridget, do you want to ask people why they're here?
Yeah, that'd be wonderful, because we envision this as being very much an open table. We'll kind of do our quickie, explanations, but then, yeah, we want your feedback and your questions. So go ahead, if everybody wants to maybe, what drew you to permaculture and villaging as an interest, and how you might be implementing it right now in your life or hope to in the future.
Or what you want to talk about in the next 20 minutes.
Hi, I'm Lynn. I love permaculture. I have taken 2 classes through UMass in terms of permaculture design, and then social permaculture. And it really resonated with me. I've read a lot of books, but I've always thought about community as a support network, and we can be sharing resources, learning tools, it is the way that we are going to need to go forward, I feel, in this coming climate crisis. And I try to learn as much as I can from Bio for Climate about what's going on and be active, and master gardener, and I try to teach what I can to others. So that's why I'm here.
I'm Ross. I gave, my wife is the gardener in the family. I gave her the list of the breakout sessions and asked her what she would be interested in. And she said, I don't know what permaculture is. Let's find out.
Nice.
I'm Laura. I'm mostly here. I'm a friend of Beck's, and I wanted to hear her talk. But I live in what I consider an intentional community with 1,600 homes. It's otherwise known as Greenbelt, Maryland, or Old Greenbelt, Maryland, and we're a livable, walkable community. We have permaculture, we have composting, stormwater management. We're trying a little bit of everything, a farmer's market. So and I'm familiar with co-housing, and I've always been fascinated with it. Thank you.
So I'm Helene Shore, and I actually live at Blueberry Hill, which is a co-housing community in Vienna. We do have composting here. We're also, the land that the homes were built on was part of Potomac Vegetable Farm, which is still running as a vegetable farm 54 years later, an active farm. So I'm interested in that. I'm also interested in villaging and from a environmental standpoint. I'm the chair and founder of 350 Fairfax, an environmental group, and I'd like to bring that sense of community to the environmental group.
Go ahead, Ellen.
Ellen Gordon. I live in the Ag Reserve. I'm not a farmer, but I'm on the board of Sugarloaf Citizens Association, and we are stewarding some land, partially moving it out of, it's been leased to farmers for conventional commodities, and we've taken 90 acres of it, and it's currently being transitioned to diverse pasturage, and will eventually have rotational grazing for livestock on it. And we have other land, not quite as much as 90 acres, that we're also going to, it's largely unused right now, or mowed, or just not well used, that we're also going to transition. And my interest is regenerative agriculture, but I'm also very interested in permaculture, and that may be a potential for some of the other land. I'm just the board member who kind of spearheads this. And I have sort of informally studied permaculture a little, and I've been up to Ben Fratton's Reed Center up in Middletown, Maryland, which is an entire 150-acre farm that's being transitioned to permaculture foods. And anyway, it's a fascinating topic. So, and the only thing I know about co-housing is just a lot of reading, but it's interesting.
I'm Barb Bacon. I'm in Alexandria, Virginia, and I'm interested in villaging, first of all. Beck and I have worked together for several years now. My current interest is in relocalization as a response to climate change and other crises. And it seems to me that permaculture and villaging both fit within the relocalization conversation. And I'm just trying to learn everything I can.
Great, thank you. Definitely a diverse group of interests as well as experiences. So yeah, hopefully this isn't going to be too repetitive, and any questions at the end are more than welcome. So I guess I'll get started, Beck.
Richard, can I ask, is anybody here a good timekeeper? Like, for all I know, we could have already used half of our time. I just don't even know.
3:25 now, and we need to change rooms at 3:50.
All right, Laura, maybe you can let us know when we're halfway.
I thought they said 3:45 verbally, but maybe it's 3:50. So you have about 20 minutes.
Okay.
So halfway, you want me to give you the
That would be
halfway?
fabulous. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Ready to go?
Bridget, are you able to speak up just a little bit?
Yes. And I can increase volume. Does that help?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I wanted to start with a quick story. Imagine a young boy living on an island off the coast of Australia called Tasmania. And at a very young age, 15, he was left school and started basically working for the family bakery. Soon after, he basically ventured out and started all kinds of careers, like jack of all trades, master of none, everything from naturalist to forester to shark fisherman, truck driver, teacher, and on and on. And at some point, he became like basically living in the bush or on sea and supplying all his own needs from the land. And what that allowed him to do was develop relationship, place-based relationship, and incredible observational powers. Those two combined developed a very, very deep connection. And I don't know if, I would say it's a love of the land. And so continued on wanting to learn more and more about the land, and then started observing, this is about 100 years ago, started observing degradation. So fisheries, entire fisheries lost. You remember the quotes that were showed, are the charts that were showed in the beginning. This is right around that time when things started growing rapidly, and what naturally follows is either pollution or degradation. He also saw the loss of the seaweeds along the shore, huge, vast areas of forest, either deforested or just basically diseased. So what that brought about is basically the crux of my talk is perspective, a change in perspective. Perspective is officially defined about what is important and what isn't. And I feel like this is really important to our culture, because our perspective, as we have heard, and I'm sure as most of you agree, that our perspective is leading us down a path of disease. It's an unhealthy situation, not only for us as humans, but our ecological systems that support us. So basically it was the love of the land, and then seeing the misuse of the land by either people, institutions, government policy, or commercial ventures that created anger. And who I'm talking about but Bill Mollison, one of the co-founders of permaculture. And this quote really resonates. First, feel fear, then get angry, then go with your life into the fight. And this sounds all very aggressive and negative and not so happy hippie-like, but he also very much stressed the need for the peaceful warrior. And when you learn a little bit more about permaculture in just a couple minutes, that peaceful warrior, that epitomizes the philosophies and the ethics of permaculture. Now, speaking of ethics, this is a really core that drew me in 25 years ago, because I was graduating from college, had a lot of debt, and I was like, you know what? I could really pretty much do anything, but let me start with just living a good life, like being a good person. So Bill came out of that realization, that change in perspective, went to college, had a thesis, a grad student, and together they pretty much came up with these ethics. 1, care of the earth. 2, care of people. And 3, limit growth. And now that's not really advertised, because population growth reminds us all of China. Well, it's more about like knowing that I've had enough. I have my fair share, and I'm okay with that. And I don't need more. And that's perspective. Less is more. And to understand that and to embrace that, even though it's not part of our cultural upbringing, that's the change in perspective that I really, really want to stress with all of Montgomery County, North America, Western civilization, because it's the crux. If you can start there by changing your perspective, you're no longer greenwashing, thinking, oh, I got to do this, I got to do that, I got to change, get these light bulbs in. No, you're saying, I am moving to a culture. And this is where permaculture comes in. Permanent, meaning, and I have the official lightning, it lasts indefinitely. Permanent. And then culture, I also kind of define that because I was interesting. It's social, behavioral, institutional, all the norms found in a human society. So imagine that, seeking a long-lasting way of being. And is this a common thing in our world as we know it today? No, it's not. It's rare, and it's disappearing among humanity. And it's really our responsibility to our children, our grandchildren, to bring it back. So off my soapbox, but I just want to open it up right now, because that was kind of a lot of big stuff. So please share or ask.
And we have about 4 minutes before maybe we'd be switching over to Beck.
Perfect.
So what is permaculture?
Right. Okay. So getting to that, it's a system of design of the natural and social, economic elements of what is around you that maximizes well-being for all of those things, using the ethics as the core to follow. Design, it could be everything from which way is my home going to face, which way are which way is the glazing on my home going to face to maximize efficiency from the solar gain, to how am I going to invest the money, the extra money that I have? Where am I going to invest it? in terms of interacting with the people around you. I have a role, this ties into villaging. This person has a role. How are we going to cooperate and basically stack the functions of each of our roles to create a synergistic effect, increase efficiency? All that creates a better, happier life for all of us. We're doing more with less, and at the same time, perpetuating life. So those design principles, I'm going to be, I could share a screen, which might help a lot. Is that okay with everyone? Yep. Okay. So I'm going to share an app, and then I'm going to get into, sorry, I was doing some farm work today. So, okay. So this is basically some of the principles around permaculture. Observe and interact, catch and store energy, obtain a yield. This does not just have to do with agriculture. Apply self-regulation, produce no waste, design from patterns. So you're following nature's patterns. Integrate rather than segregate, small and slow. So it's not just get it done all at once, but one change, what does that change do? That's why you go back to the number one, observe and interact. Use and value diversity. Use edges, value the marginal, so what's not super common, value that, and creatively use and respond to change. So permaculture, it's very deep. It's basically indigenous and first people's knowledges from thousands and thousands of years, all compiled. So it's not something you can just really like know all of a sudden, but you can take a permaculture design class, local, Bowie, forested in Bowie. It's kind of where I took my first official one. And you start slow and start with your place, your world. Once you have your perspective and you follow basic design principles and ethics, and you start implementing it on a small scale, it's a learning process. Does that answer your question, Ross?
Yeah, I think the answer to Ross's question is there's like 20 pieces to this that is a really deep design. There's a lot to learn. But I love what you said, Bridget, and if you're ready to transition, because what we're both talking about are systems of interacting with the natural world and systems with interacting with each other. And I want to start off with the kinds of neighborhoods we live in. And as I told you, I've lived in a lot of different kinds of neighborhoods. And right now I live in the suburbs. And what I've learned is that we're not all going to be able to live in co-housing. We're not going to tear down the suburbs that already exist. And I'm not thrilled about the clean city of the future. That's not where I want to live. And, you know, is there room for everybody in rural areas? I don't know. But the fact is that already half of Americans live in suburban environments. And that includes people of every race and ethnicity, according to the 2020 census. So we already have an infrastructure that's built out. How can we make the most of it? So that's one piece of villaging and kind of a permaculture principle, deal with what you have, right? Make the most of what you have. And I just want to pick maybe one of the foundations is that we live with a myth of independence in our communities. So you probably don't remember this, Aline, being you've been in co-housing for so long, but in your typical neighborhood, if you knock on your neighbor's door and ask to borrow something, they might say yes, but they're going to think you're weird. And here's how I know. I had a flood in my basement one day, and I go across the street. I know this is a young family, and they've got boys, and I'm like, oh, do you have a wet vac I could borrow? And the wife's like, oh, yeah, sure. Take this big wet vac. So problem solved. I return it cleaner than I borrowed it, I'm telling you. And the husband says, hey, these are only $75 at Home Depot. You should get one for yourself. Now, I've lived in this house for, my family's been in this house for 50 years. This is the first time we needed a wet vac for a basement. And it's just built in, right? Like, why would you come and ask to borrow this? Because our houses are our castles. And we are the king in this castle, and this castle gives us independence. We don't rely on anybody. But here's the myth, and you probably already know this is a myth. Look around you right now. Where did almost everything that you're looking at come from? It came from the corporate supply chains that Richard Heinberg has told us are already stressed and not sustainable. Like, we already knew they weren't good for the planet. Now we're not even sure they're going to hold. So while we're being told we're independent, we are completely dependent on this economic system that we are trying to overthrow and change at the same time that we depend on it. How is that ever going to work? So the idea of villaging then is to break apart. How do we break apart that cultural story and that cultural narrative? And I have a few ideas. And I think I will share my little short slides because I just can't resist. I'm a slide person. So let's go to screen share real quick. And it might help you give a quick idea about what this is all about, because it's, I know you've seen the wrong thing. I'm trying to move this box. Ugh. There we go. Let me get you set up here. Shorter villaging. You're going to get the shorter villaging. We're not going to go to full screen because I want to be able to jump around here. But can you see the big slide one? What is the village? All right. So if we have more time, and if you come to my free workshop later this month, you'll get a chance to share your visions and we can talk a lot more about this. But when you think about, we are creating our world with every choice we make. And I love how Charles Eisenstein puts it. What is the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible? When you create your vision, don't ask, what will my neighbors do? What will my homeowners association let me do? Ask, what is the vision you want? And I turn to village as a village archetype. There's a lot of different kinds of villages. Villages still exist all over the world. We don't really see a lot of that here in the US, but it's tried and true. And this is for Bridget. Here's an aerial of a village. For those of you who know permaculture, there's zones. Here's your house zone. Here's your garden zone. Here's your farming zone. And on the outside here is your wilderness zone. So people have kind of been keen on these ideas of zoning for a long time. The second piece of villaging is connecting through doing. Oh no, the second piece is your bread labor. Reclaiming the pieces of the economy that belong to us. Not all the pieces. I'm never going to make an iPhone in my house. I read a story once, a guy tried to make a toaster without using any of the capitalism, right? It's impossible. So assuming some of that system is still in place, what are the things that people are kind of born to do? The making food, growing food, the making, the baking, the growing, the fixing, these enrich our lives. And even though we don't need to do them anymore, those are the same categories that our hobbies fall into. That's how intrinsic they are to our sense of well-being. So what are those skills? Who would you be in the village? Would you be the baker, the tailor, whatever? There's a lot of ways you can think about it, depending on how much imagination you have.
And Beck, you have about 5 minutes left.
Good, we're going to get there then. The third is connected by doing. So instead of building just social connections, and this is the key to villaging, those skills you are experiencing, you're baking, you're growing, you reach out to a neighbor, not a friend, not an affinity group, but a neighbor, someone in walking distance. Because when we don't have fossil fuels, you're not going to be driving off to the community garden. You're not going to be eating food that you grew with your cyber friends. And this is the part that's most challenging. And this is why we need a little bit of a movement and a way to support each other and how to best make that first connection. But when you're connected by baking together, by growing together, by sharing your tomatoes with someone who's canning, you're building connections based on outside of ideology, outside of partisanship, outside of being a sociable person. And that is going to be very powerful. And it's how villages have traditionally been held together. The very last piece is this growth. Instead of starting with how do I turn my neighborhood into a village, each of those links you build starts to grow on each other and you create a net. And it looks like whatever it looks like. And this is also an experiment in non-domination, emergent-based leadership and organization. We're not starting by telling people how to organize their neighborhood. We're starting by reaching out and making connections and seeing what kind of community we grow from that. I said there were 5 pieces. The 5th is that this connection equals joy. You don't have to wait for breakdown. You don't have to wait for collapse. This kind of living in this kind of neighborhood, you're going to love. I have a vision of mine that I could share with you about what that looks like. I walk through my neighborhood and the people I wave to are people I've gardened with, baked with, who helped me fix my bike, and I help them mend some clothes. We sit out on our porches waiting for each other to pass by. You know, what kind of bread are you baking this week? Can you come over and help me fix my bike? And our community starts to grow. That's the short version. I urge you to walk through your neighborhood and see what you can imagine as a connected, village-oriented place. We have a lot more time to talk about this. September 27th, come and join me, and we'll have some interactive exercises and go into some more details about what might make this possible, and you'll be part of growing this vision. You can also go to my website, villaging.us, and learn a little bit more about it. Join my blog mailing list. Like, I'm just getting started on this, so you won't be bombarded, but I hope that gives you a different vision of what is possible in any neighborhood that you live in, not just having to go off and build an eco-village. Though eco-villagers are cool, and I know Bridget's doing that. I don't know if we have any time for any feedback. Anybody want to mention something?
I'll just mention that in our neighborhood, McMansions growing up all over the place, and the stereotype, which is fairly accurate, is they never come out of their homes. Their homes are huge. They go from their homes to their car. So those are not the people that are probably going to be villagers, but fortunately, there's a lot of all their small houses still there.
And this is why I hear people in vulnerable neighborhoods already rely on each other more than people in less vulnerable neighborhoods. But really, our work in villaging is to imagine a reality where you knock on that door and say, hey, I'm baking some bread tomorrow, and I wondered if you wanted to come over and do that with me. And they're going to be like, whatever they say. You know, it's scary because we don't know what they'll say, but it opens a conversation, right?
This is the way it used to be, though. I mean, farm communities came together to do barn raisings. They came together to make quilts. They came together to put up food. They came together to do all the things that we as human beings need, and for community in terms of support when somebody died, or, you know, we do that still, but not enough like we should be doing. You know, when Sandy happened, I'm in New Jersey, and then the last one, Ida, I mean, it brings people together. Disasters bring people together. And tomorrow, I'm sad to say, it's September 11th, but you know what? It shouldn't be just about disasters. We should be doing this on a regular basis.
It's so true. And that's why I didn't create a new name for this, because really this kind of organization goes back to the beginning of civilization. So yeah.
Some communities also have time banks. In Greenbelt, we have Greenbelt Time Bank, where you exchange services, and you do get paid in an hour, where other places it would just be total, pay forwarding. But, I've had people mend my clothing, I weed my garden, people give each other rides, and they meet strangers who are looking for these services, cat sitting or whatever. And that's one way that newcomers especially build community in my town.
Laura, Greenbelt may be what we imagine. We may have to do a field trip and see how close we can get to that.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, anytime.
Thank you.
We've had a good deal of success with repair cafes. We've held a number of them and they're very, very popular. People keep asking, when's the next one? When's the next one? And the repair experts love them more than the customers do. And the atmosphere in the room during the cafe is absolutely electric because people are just connecting. It's just wonderful.
Hey guys, I think there was a message about 3 minutes ago saying it was time to switch up to the next group.
Okay, well, and I do see some new people coming in, so maybe we're not being kicked out of this room. We just have to leave. So
Well, I think we'll stay back and then everybody else find another room or yeah.
Thank you very much. This was
thanks
really
for coming.
wonderful.
Bye-bye.
All right. Should we get started? Or I think someone came and then left. I didn't know if they knew that we were.
Welcome.
Yeah, I think it was confusing because there wasn't the usual breakout room. You've got 2 minutes left, and you're kicked out or something. So it depended, like my first breakout room just stopped. We all decided to leave, and then it was kind of finding a new breakout room that wasn't just in the 20th minute of their first thing and going on and on. So I'm glad you're starting all over again.
As people are joining, this is a new session.
Yay.
We're just waiting for people to come in so they know. I guess you want to get started with introductions first, or
Yeah, we can start introductions and then people coming in will have a chance to catch up.
All right, sounds good. Okay, hi everybody. I'm sure you already know I'm Bridget Downer from Chicken of the Woods Permaculture Farm. Been exposed to permaculture 25 years ago, fresh out of college, interned lots of different places, implemented permaculture in every place that I've lived. It's a system of design. It's pretty huge and pretty deep. So what I'm going to be talking about more is the origins and what it really means. There's so many details that we do not have time to get into right now. But a year at the USDA Climate Stress Lab really solidified that permaculture, in my opinion, is going to be our only option. And that's why I've pretty much committed my life to it. So thank you for being here. Can't wait to talk to y'all.
And I'm Beck Mordini. I have worked in nonprofits. I'm a climate activist, but it's my personal life that inspires me with villaging. And I have lived in co-housing. I have homesteaded in the suburbs with my chickens. That's my favorite picture. And had an opportunity to live at the Twin Oaks commune for almost a month in Louisa, Virginia. And I'm very interested in how communities come together and resilience, whatever we're doing in the future and even what we're getting satisfaction from in the present is all about community. And so that's what I'm interested in.
And if each of you could maybe introduce yourselves and quickly share why you're here and what you might want to gain from this little breakout session. Anybody?
Sure. Go ahead.
I'm Alex Bell. I live in Rockville. I've been in my current house since year 2000, I think. And I've heard about permaculture, but I really don't know what it would mean in my yard, as it were. I'm trying to do more gardening and getting out invasive plants and putting in native plants and stuff.
Yeah.
Some vegetable gardening, or at least I have blueberries. Yay.
All food. Thanks.
Thanks, Alex. Jed?
Sure. I'm a retired educator with not much background in working with kids in nature and wanting to kind of do a lot more of that in my retired status. And I live on Martha's Vineyard Island off the coast of Massachusetts, part of Massachusetts. And many of the farms, a lot of small farms, And many of them are really picking up concepts of permaculture and regenerative agriculture. And I'd like to find out more about both and possibly continue. I've started to work with some local programs of getting kids into nature. A lot of them already do that here in the vineyard, but don't necessarily know that much about how interconnected it all can be. So I'm looking forward to finding out more about that.
Anyone else? Okay.
Sure. I'm Randy Anway. I'm an architect from Connecticut. Also a biomimicry specialist for the last decade or so. Yeah, so permaculture has kind of been on my radar screen. One of the things I find extremely frustrating and almost like one of these things like, why can't people get through their heads? The way we have zoning going in this country is just so ridiculously idiotic. And it's a huge barrier to doing more of this stuff. Euclidean zoning, which basically sequesters housing and industry and cities, and it's like, it's idiotic. We can really do better. I will get off my soapbox, but I appreciate hearing about the ideas you have to put forward and how we might take some steps in a positive direction.
Great, thanks. Tara?
Yeah, I'm Tara Rice and I live in Gaithersburg, and I'm here because I do some container gardening, mainly on the patio, and permaculture is something that I'm interested in learning more about. And then I'm also interested in learning more about villaging and how communities form. I live in an apartment, I'm a renter, but one day I'm going to buy. And so when I buy, I want to be very thoughtful about where I go. So very interested in both of your topics.
Awesome. Okay, that's huge. And thanks so much for sharing. Okay, I'm going to get started. Because I really do feel like perspective is pretty important here. And if you go into it with the right perspective, then you're going to be making the right decisions and understand things in a new way. So imagine a young boy growing up in Tasmania and left school to run the family bakery at age 15, and then basically hit every different kind of profession where he could work, varying from fisherman to teacher, naturalist, forester, and all through that time learned to live off the land, whether it was the bush or in the sea. And the land-based connection, and this is not just an individual like scenario, but that land-based connection fosters a sense of love of the land. And when this individual started seeing entire fisheries failing, seaweed basically dying on large parts of the shoreline, forests basically either being deforested or rampant basically destruction of them, he got really angry. And this is Bill Mollison, who we're talking about, one of the co-founders of permaculture, and his quote, which I think has guided my life: first feel fear, then get angry, then go with your life into the fight. So I really, I pushed this idea. And then, I forgot to mention, he also stressed the need for a peaceful warriors. So this is moving away from the anti we're at, and changing our perspective. Perspective is what is important and what isn't. So to understand, to come from a perspective that allows us to foster the love of the land as peaceful warriors, but not lose the fact that the culture that we were raised in, so the only culture we know, right? Because none of us, I don't think, have had a chance to be with Indigenous or First Peoples. The only culture we know is not taking us or our children or our friends in nature in a living, direction. It is taking us in a non-living direction. And to me, that has been an ever-present realization that has guided my actions. So light bulbs are not going to change that. Different kinds of technologies that are not in a large, big picture framework are not going to change that. It is this perspective that starts from your core and influences every action of your life. That's what's going to change it. And I like to start that as something I feel very strongly about. So what is permaculture? Some people think it's actually permanent agriculture. It's not. It started as permanent, which is lasts indefinitely, and culture, which is all those things that surround human societies. It's everything from social behavior, the institutions, the norms, all within a society. So imagine that, a lasting forever, human-centered world that takes care of us, that it must if it lasts forever. So that's health, wellness, happiness. Those are the cores. And which I love the fact that the ethics of permaculture, this is like gets down to the nitty-gritty, but it's care of earth, care of people. And it actually originated as limit growth, which we don't really like to talk about now, but if you're acquiring, there's going to be pollution, there's going to be waste, and that is not, you cannot sustain that. That's not an indefinite state of being. So we have to understand when we've had enough. We cannot have this idea in our head that my needs and my wants are the same. So to redefine your needs, I think, is also a big part of adopting permaculture into our lives. That's the philosophy behind it. Now we get to the fun part, which is the design. So wherever you live, whether it be that apartment or a huge acreage or on a houseboat, you're thinking ecologically, economically, and socially. How is what I am doing the best actions for perpetuating the wellness of my world? Right? So in this video that Louise will send out that I don't have time to share now, it actually talks about, it's a wheel. Actually, I'm going to do it right now because I can just show you the wheel right now and talk about it in the video. All right. So right here, basically, see here, we have all of these principles that we need to follow surrounding the ethics. But it's something that circles upon itself. Here's an example of a few of them. Catch and store energy, use and value diversity, produce no waste. Okay, this is not only agriculture that we're talking about. Creatively use and respond to change. And the idea is that if we only pick a few of these, we're out of balance and our wheel here is going to wobble. But if we make sure to recircle back, use certain ones to check others. Oh, here, apply self-regulation and accept feedback. So this is really a philosophical change from what our culture tells us. I mean, honestly, I was put on that treadmill from a very young age, and it was like, forge on, meet these guidelines, and you're going to be happy. And I realized that's not happiness, and that's not longevity. And the last thing I'd like to share is that the first peoples, especially the Haudenosaunee, which are native to the land we're on now, they went into their meetings, peace pipe powwows, with one, not thinking about how is this going to affect my husband and my kids or my wife, or thinking how will this affect my children or my grandchildren. No, they went in saying, how is this going to affect 7 generations down the line? So if you can imagine that kind of big thinking, right? I mean, we talk about big thinking in our society, but big thinking in terms of longevity of culture, then that's what I think is the core to permaculture. And all the rest is like icing on the cake. Check out Forested and Bowie if you're local. University of Oregon has, if you're not local, has some incredible online classes. A lot of the content is free. And go to a permaculture place. If you can spring a trip to Tagari Farm, 1978, they started, Bill Mollison started there. But basically, you've got to carry with you the idea that things aren't right. and what can I do to change that? And you, not politics, not something that it's going to be a bunch of people depending on whether or not that happens. That's going to demotivate you. You are in charge of yourself, your actions, who you support, what you talk about, and who you connect with, and grow your own food. All right. Thanks so much, everybody. I'm going to send it over to Beck.
Thanks,
Any
Bridget.
questions? Are there any questions? Sorry.
And we can also have questions after as well.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, so my quest has been in community. And I've lived in a lot of different kinds of community. But really strikes me is that we need to be able to build community wherever we are. And just like permaculture, I look at what are the stories that we're telling ourselves that are keeping us from having the kind of life that would be more fulfilling and authentic for us. So in our neighborhoods in North America, we are taught that we are the king of our castle in our own home. And we are sold this myth of independence, that we don't have to rely on anybody because we have everything we need ourselves. And what that looks like is if I go to my neighbor and ask to borrow something, they're going to think, what's wrong with you? Why would you borrow a cup of sugar when you could drive down to the grocery store, right? And so this is kind of baked in that there's something wrong with having to depend on each other. But this independence is a complete myth. When you look around your house right now, you are surrounded by things that came from a complex supply chain that is global, that destroys the earth, and that is actually falling apart as we speak, as Richard Heinberg pointed out. We are not independent. We are completely dependent on this system. And that is no accident, because we can't change a system. We can't bring down a system that we are dependent on. So where can we break this down? And Villaging says, how did people used to do this before the global supply chain? And goes to the very humble model of villages, which still exist all over the world. They're not really familiar to us in the United States, but they exist everywhere. And I pulled out a village archetype. And, you know, like permaculture, there's a little bit more to it than we have time for today. But the key is, there's a few keys. The first one is to have a vision of the community that you would like to live in. And even in your apartment building, Tara, when you walk down, I have a friend who lives in an apartment, and they've got these little gathering areas by the elevator and whatnot. I've never seen people there, right? What would it look like if that was a market center, a community center in your building? So these principles are available any place. And one of the first things to reclaim from this corporate supply chain is your bread labor, the things that we love to do with our hands anyway. What can we produce for ourselves? Using permaculture, you might be growing food. But then the next step is to produce those things with a neighbor, somebody in walking distance, not a friend, but somebody that you can throw a rock, not really throw a rock, I can't throw a rock 2 feet, but somebody that you don't rely on fossil fuels to go visit. Are you going to be driving down to the community garden in a post-carbon world? I don't think so. What if your backyard was the community garden and you invited the neighbor's kids to help you weed, and you invited a different neighbor to come and share your tomatoes and do the canning? And then another neighbor, you know, has let you know that they bake bread every morning, and they're going to bring bread over, and you're going to have spaghetti sauce. And then the other neighbor, one by one, these links start to build a community. But it starts with realizing that the trade-offs we've made aren't worth it, that there are certain parts of this system that inherently feel good to reclaim. And the last thing about villaging is it's not about getting your neighborhood to do X or Y. It's an emergent process that builds up these links that naturally is going to build a community that looks different for everybody, but it's going to have a lot of things in common. And Randall, you know, these zoning laws, it's a huge issue, right? And so the villaging model brings some of that cottage industry back. In a post-carbon world, when collapse really hits us, all those little links could become guilds, they could become small businesses, they could be things that we really rely on. But building that community first is going to be really important. Do I have time to share 2 slides? I don't know. I'm so bad at keeping time, but I think I will try to do that because I just want to share.
Looks like we have till 4:22, so.
All right. I'm not going to put this in full screen. Hopefully you can see enough of this because I want to be able to jump around a little bit. Here is your classic village. Oh, I'm going to show it in big screen. If you know anything about permaculture, here's your house zone. Here's your garden zone. Here's your farm zone. And here's your wild zone. When you go home tonight, think about what that might look like in your neighborhood. But those are also permaculture zones, which you can learn about. When I talk about, and the other thing I wanted to share, you don't have to wait for collapse to do this. This makes you more fulfilled, you more connected, you have a place in your village. And it's something we all need right now, because aside from running out of food, as Philip mentioned, we're suffering from isolation. It's a disease in our society. So come to the villaging workshop. It's free, it's on Zoom. Let's talk more about what your vision is, what these steps are, and make this happen. And go to the webpage to learn a little bit more about the ideas. It's up there and it's ready. And that's what I'm going to end with. Open up the floor.
Yeah. Anybody have any questions or want to share their environment, get a quickie like consult on their places? Go ahead.
Well, where I live in Rockville, I'm actually in a village. I mean, because Montgomery County has a villaging setup. So that's nice, and it has been a good way to get to know neighbors. I actually think, I haven't done this yet, but I actually think for this sort of village concept, it's front yard gardens are going to make a much bigger difference than backyard gardens. It's harder to share what you have in the backyard than it is to share what you have in the front yard. But I only know of one person in my neighborhood who plants things like sunflowers and tomatoes and stuff in her front yard. I think it looks wonderful, but I don't even know if it's, I don't know what the zoning is for, or the community association rules are, or if I wanted to plant stuff in the area between the sidewalk and the street, you know, am I allowed to do that? I don't know any of those things.
Well, that's to first, find out about what, if any, you know, homeowner association rules. We have 5 minutes left, just so you know, are there, and then basically push them, because that's growing food space. And so as long as they're okay, and there are beautiful flowers on an okra tree that will,
I love okra.
that will blossom throughout the year. So there's so many conversation starters, and you start building soil now. If you're in Moco, Leaf Grow, it's at all the home improvement stores, or you can get it by bulk, contacting the Department of Ag. Maybe if you're in a village, you guys can get a dump truck load. But build soil, and choose those edible flowers as well as your corn stalks, and give away the corn stalks when you've harvested the corn off. But know that you're not going to get anyone called on you, because Moco is infamous. Moco neighbors are infamous for calling authorities without knowing much. Trust me, I've had multiple interactions with every level of authority. But we've been in the legal. But yeah, find out the rules and then push those, and you'll be the trendsetter in the neighborhood and the coolest gal in town.
And here's the other thing I want to say about that is if your community local spaghetti dinner depends on people growing tomatoes in their front yard, you're going to more likely, whatever the rule is, you're going to have some community behind you to support that, right? As opposed to being on the individual. And it is the hardest part about villaging. It is the mind shift. And, you know, that's why we need a community and a movement to help us make that shift. And these aren't social connections per se. They are based on working together. And I believe that's what's held traditional villages together, is shared work. And if you've ever built a community, you know, building co-housing, you do a lot of shared work up front. But I'm not sure Americans have the patience to do that, and that we all have the time to do that. And that's why this idea is to create that where you are in any kind of neighborhood.
Anybody else? You want
Well,
to
I'm
share?
reminded of a conversation I had with an acquaintance in New Zealand about, this is probably about more than 10 years ago now. And at the time she was doing some work with communities around water. So I asked her, well, how do you find these communities? What she said just really stuck with me. Is she said, you know, in most places there aren't communities. They don't exist. So the first place she went was the schools, because that's where people get together and actually interact with each other. And so I think that's sort of a huge leverage point that we don't often think about in this sort of thing. But, you know, you talked about skills, and so getting together around skills and building coalitions around skills, I think that could make some sense. How do you teach this to your kids? How do you teach this to how do your neighbors learn? Why can't you use the facilities at the local school to, you know, to do some of this activity? So that seems like, you know, sort of maybe a logical starting point for some people.
And those are great places to find community, but I would also encourage you, when you walk down the street and you see somebody fixing his kid's bike, to connect and just ask, like, oh, you know, I wanted to work on my bike, but I didn't really know what to do. Do you mind if I came over? Or likewise, it's always easier to offer something than ask for something, but don't wait for the big movement. These little links, I believe these little links have potential to grow a whole community, but, you know, start where you are. I mean, every kind of community organizing is valuable, but.
And Randall, I might make a point that right when the pandemic hit, since we're pretty much a electronic free family, I started a farm cooperative with homeschoolers. And since everything was closing, all the activities for homeschoolers was closing, everybody came out. And so for 2.5 years, we had, I don't know, maybe up to 8 families twice a week coming out, working on the farm, playing. We had guest speakers, adults came out, and it was magical. It kind of left with the pandemic because everybody's closer things started. But yeah, that kind of environment. I was soliciting all my neighbors to come too, but yeah, the kids were in school on the computer. But it is a great place. And starting with the youth is really essential. They need reconnection with the land more than they need anything else right now.
Well, I think
I
we're
just
going
want
to
to
be
say
kicked out.
thank you. Because I guess we're supposed to leave, but thank you so much. It was really good.
Thank you.
Take care. Good luck to you and your
Great conversation. Thank you.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you. Great conversation.